My parents did not come to the main event of my entire life because they were flying to vacation, and then they got offended that I did not feed the dog. For more than 2 years, I poured everything I had into this one dream. My name's Ethan Walker, I'm 26, and I work as a robotics engineer in Seattle. Ever since I graduated, I've had this goal in my mind, to design something that could blow people away at the National Technical Innovation Competition. It's basically the Olympics for nerds like me, and winning there can mean grants, sponsorships, and job offers from the biggest companies. It wasn't just some casual side project either. I sacrificed weekends, late nights, holidays. Everything went into building this robot. I made sure my family knew how important this was to me. I didn't just casually mention it. I made actual Canva invitations for the competition. Bright colors, little robot icons, the whole deal. I sent them to everyone. My mom, Linda, my dad, Robert, my younger sister Brianna, and my cousins Troy and Hannah. And I didn't stop there. I posted reminders in the family group chat every few weeks. Hey, just a heads up, 50 days until competition day. Mark your calendars, guys. Really hope you can make it. Big day coming up. Hope to see my support squad there. I even made a little countdown widget and sent screenshots of it. I wasn't exactly subtle. They all seemed supportive at first. Lots of thumbs up emojis. Some were so proud of you. Messages. I even had a few calls with my mom where she said she was excited and asked what she should wear. Brianna promised she'd take videos for me since I'd probably be too busy to even notice the audience. Hannah said she'd invite her boyfriend too because he was super into tech and would think it was the coolest thing ever. Troy didn't say much, but that's kind of his default setting. He's one of those reacts with a nod types. As the big day approached, my life was complete chaos. The robot, named Argo, by the way, was a masterpiece, but man, it fought me every step of the way. 2 weeks before the competition, one of the motors fried itself. 3 days later, the vision sensor kept glitching like it was having a seizure. I barely slept. I lived on Red Bull and instant noodles. My apartment looked like a tornado had hit a Radio Shack. But I didn't care. This was my dream, and I could see the finish line. The night before the competition, I barely slept. I was too wired, double-checking every servo, every piece of code. I set 5 alarms because God help me if I overslept. When I woke up, my phone had a bunch of notifications. Good luck texts from a couple of college friends. You got this, from my old professor. And nothing from my family. Weird, but okay. Maybe they were waiting to surprise me at the event. I got to the convention center super early. Set up Argo at my booth. Did all the checks. Paced like a maniac. It was huge. Thousands of people. Booths everywhere. Cameras. Judges with clipboards walking around looking very important. My palms were sweaty as hell. I kept glancing toward the entrance, half expecting to see my mom's bright floral dress or Brianna's curly hair bouncing in the crowd. But nothing. I kept waiting. 1 hour in. 2 hours. Still no sign of them. I started getting this sinking feeling, but I shoved it aside. Maybe they were just running late. Maybe parking was a nightmare. Maybe they wanted to catch the awards ceremony at the end. When it was finally my turn to present, I took a deep breath, grabbed the mic, and launched into my pitch. I gave it everything I had. Argo performed perfectly. No glitches, no mechanical hiccups. It even managed the tricky obstacle course I had programmed it for, which made the judges lean in and start taking notes like crazy. When I finished, there was real applause, not just polite clapping. A couple of judges even stayed after to ask detailed questions. I couldn't have been prouder of Argo, of myself. But when I stepped off the stage and scanned the crowd again, my heart sank. Still no family. No mom tearing up in the front row. No Brianna cheering with her phone held high. No Robert nodding in that quiet way he did when he was proud, but didn't want to show it too much. No Hannah. No Troy. Nothing. I checked my phone again. No missed calls. No texts. No apologies about being late. Just nothing. I stayed until the end, just in case they showed up late. I won second place, which was huge, considering the competition, and I got a plaque and an offer for an internship at a top robotics firm. Everyone else was hugging their families, posing for pictures with their trophies. I stood there alone, holding my plaque, smiling stiffly at the photographer who asked if I wanted a commemorative photo. Driving home that night felt like I had a hole in my chest. I didn't even turn the radio on. I just drove in silence, feeling this weird mixture of pride and loneliness churning inside me. When I finally walked into my apartment, I saw a message from my mom had finally popped up, sent 2 hours after the competition ended. Hey honey, sorry we couldn't make it today. Brianna wasn't feeling well and Troy and Hannah had something come up. Your dad and I figured it would be better to just let you focus. We knew you'd do great. I stared at the screen, rereading it over and over. I didn't know what hurt more, that they didn't come, or that they acted like it was no big deal. Like they hadn't promised for months that they'd be there. Like they hadn't seen how much this meant to me. I didn't reply. I just put my phone down, sat on my couch in the dark, and stared at Argo, still packed neatly in his travel case by the door. I had built a robot smart enough to navigate obstacles, solve problems, and adapt on the fly. But somehow, I had never figured out how to navigate the reality that sometimes the people you love the most just do not show up when it matters. I stood in the cramped dressing room, pulling on the bright blue jumpsuit I had designed for the competition, my hands trembling slightly with a mix of nerves and excitement. The fabric felt stiff against my skin, the seams tugging at my shoulders as I zipped it up to my neck. I caught a glimpse of myself in the cracked mirror propped up against the wall. I looked every bit the part, even if inside I felt like a kid about to take his first dive into deep water. Frankie sat on the workbench next to me, polished and gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. I ran my hand over his curved aluminum shell, feeling the cool, reassuring texture beneath my fingers. "You ready, buddy?" I whispered, half expecting him to beat back at me. Frankie was the second version of the robot after Argo, a little more experimental, a lot more personal. If Argo had been for my career, Frankie was for me. I double-checked every connection, every tiny wire and bolt, even though I knew I had already done it a dozen times that morning. It gave me something to focus on, something to keep my mind from spinning out of control. Voices echoed from the stage down the hall, bursts of laughter, the occasional cheer. Other teams were already performing, some getting standing ovations, others a polite clapping. I tried to drown it all out and just focus on Frankie. This was our moment, our shot. Finally, the stage coordinator poked her head in. "You're up next, Ethan. 5 minutes." I nodded, swallowing against the dryness in my throat. As I picked up Frankie's remote control and tucked it into the side pocket of my jumpsuit, I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and stepped into the backstage area. The bright stage lights bled into the wings, casting long shadows that stretched toward the buzzing audience. I could hear the excitement rolling through the crowd like a living thing. Laughs, cheers, someone yelling a name. My heart hammered against my ribs as I edged closer to the curtain, careful not to trip over the coiled wires on the floor. I glanced out into the sea of faces, scanning the rows, desperate for a familiar one. The other participants had entire cheering squads, moms holding glittery posters, dads with cameras, friends waving homemade banners that said things like, "Go Josh and Titan," or "Lily's Tech Tigers rule." The noise was deafening, a mix of clapping, whistling, and shouting. Every other kid seemed to have an army behind them. And there I stood, alone. I strained my eyes, searching for even a glimpse of my mom's curly hair, my dad's baseball cap, Brianna's bright smile, anything that could anchor me. Nothing. Just strangers' faces, bright signs for other people's dreams, and the roaring tide of excitement that I was somehow standing outside of. I looked down at Frankie, sitting quietly in his starter position on the little transport cart I had built for him. I reached down and gave the top of his chassis a little tap, like a coach psyching up a player before a big game. "Just you and me, pal," I murmured under my breath. The announcer called my name over the loudspeaker, his voice booming and cheerful, and the stagehand gave me the signal to go. I pushed Frankie's cart forward, stepping out into the blinding light. A sea of strangers cheering for reasons that had nothing to do with me, my heart thudding so loudly in my ears that for a second I thought I might pass out. But I kept moving, kept walking to the center of the stage where Frankie and I were about to show them exactly what 2 years of blood, sweat, and hope looked like. As soon as my part of the performance wrapped up, I guided Frankie back toward the wings of the stage, my hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline that was still rushing through me. The judges nodded politely, a few clapped, and I even caught one of them smiling, but it all felt muted, almost distant. My whole body felt heavy as I rolled Frankie off to the side and knelt down to start disconnecting the battery pack, trying to distract myself from the gnawing emptiness inside my chest. I sat down on a low bench backstage. Frankie parked right next to me like a loyal dog, and pulled out my phone, half hoping maybe, just maybe, there would be a missed call, a text message, something from my family telling me they were on their way or that they had been stuck in traffic but were coming soon. Instead, the screen lit up with a notification from Instagram, and for a second, I froze, thumb hovering over it. Curiosity got the better of me, and I tapped it open. The app loaded sluggishly, the convention center's Wi-Fi dragging, but eventually the photo popped up. It took me a moment to register what I was seeing. There they were, my whole family. Mom, Dad, Brianna, Troy, and Hannah, all standing together on a beach somewhere, wearing matching white t-shirts that said Family Vibes 2025 in big, cheerful letters. They were laughing, squinting against the bright Miami sun, the turquoise ocean stretching out behind them like a postcard. Even my dad, who usually hated matching shirts and public photos, had his arm thrown around Brianna, grinning like he was having the time of his life. My stomach twisted so hard it felt like someone had punched me. Right underneath the photo, in bold cursive font, was the caption, "Blessed moments together," followed by a string of tropical emojis. I stared at it, not even blinking, my heart pounding harder than it had during my entire performance. They were in Miami. At the exact same time I was standing on stage, trying to make them proud. They hadn't even bothered to tell me they were leaving town. The screen blinked again, and a new message from my mom popped up. I opened it with fingers that felt strangely numb. "Sorry, honey, we couldn't change the dates. You understand, right?" I read it once, then again, hoping that maybe I had misread it, that there was some hidden layer of explanation that would make it hurt less. But there wasn't. No apology. No regret. Just a casual, almost dismissive reassurance. Like missing the biggest day of my life was on par with forgetting a coffee date. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen while around me, other participants hugged their families, posed for pictures with their medals, and laughed about how stressful the day had been. The weight of it pressed down harder and harder, making it hard to breathe, hard to even think. I locked my phone without answering and slipped it back into my pocket, blinking hard against the sting building behind my eyes. Frankie sat next to me, silent and steady, the only thing in that whole building that I knew for sure was on my side. When they finally called my name for the finals, I gathered Frankie and walked back toward the stage, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might split my chest wide open. I tried to block everything else out, tried to pretend that it was just me and Frankie, that nothing outside of this mattered. As I stepped into the blinding lights again, the noise of the crowd crashed over me like a wave, a mess of cheering and shouting that somehow felt both deafening and distant at the same time. Frankie rolled smoothly across the polished floor, responding perfectly to every command I had programmed. Every pivot, every climb over obstacles, every tricky maneuver I had spent months perfecting, he nailed them all without so much as a stutter. It was flawless, better than any of the test runs we had done back in my garage, better even than I had dared hope. I could hear the judges murmuring to each other, pens flying over their score sheets, and a small part of me dared to feel proud, dared to think that maybe, just maybe, this was enough to make up for everything. When the final scores were announced, there was a pause so long that I thought maybe they had forgotten to include us. Then the host, a tall guy in a suit 2 sizes too big, boomed into the microphone. "First place in this year's National Technical Innovation Competition goes to Ethan Walker and Frankie." The crowd erupted. I stood there frozen for a second, feeling the shock roll through me before it turned into something sharp and bright. I walked forward, numb and exhilarated all at once, and accepted the heavy glass trophy they handed me, its engraved letters glinting under the hot lights. As I turned to face the audience, still clutching Frankie's remote in one hand and the trophy in the other, the host leaned down slightly, smiling warmly. "Big day for you, huh? Is your family here to celebrate with you?" I laughed before I could stop myself, a short, rough sound that didn't match the smiles around me. "They're at the beach," I said, and the microphone picked up the words a little too clearly. A few people in the front rows chuckled awkwardly, not quite sure if it was a joke or not. It wasn't. The photographer came up onto the stage, calling winners to group together with their families for the press photo. All around me, kids were hugging their parents, lifting their trophies high while their siblings snapped pictures with shaky hands. Moms were crying into their sleeves, dads were pounding their sons on the back, friends were jumping up and down together, screaming like they had just won the Super Bowl. And there I stood, alone. I tightened my grip on the trophy and forced a smile for the camera as the photographer counted down, feeling the flash sear the moment into permanence. One kid, holding a gleaming trophy, standing apart from the sea of hugging families and neon-colored signs, a single figure that nobody else seemed to notice or claim. I glanced down at Frankie, still parked obediently beside me, and for a second I thought about lifting him into the photo too, but my arms suddenly felt too heavy to move. The photographer shouted thank you, and the moment broke apart into chaos again, parents ushering their kids off stage, promising ice cream, promising celebrations, promising everything that I had spent the last 2 years thinking would be waiting for me too. I stood there for a few more seconds, just to make sure it was really over. Then I turned, gathered Frankie, and walked off the stage into the echoing emptiness behind the curtains. By the time I got home that night, the sky outside had turned the kind of deep, inky blue that only shows up after a long, exhausting day. I parked my car in the narrow driveway, grabbed the trophy from the passenger seat where it had been rolling around every time I hit a turn, and trudged up to my apartment. Frankie stayed in the trunk, still secured in his cart, because I did not have the energy to haul him upstairs too. Inside, the place was cold and silent, exactly the way I had left it. I dropped my backpack by the door and carried the trophy to the kitchen, setting it right in the middle of the empty dining table. It looked almost ridiculous there, surrounded by a few unpaid bills, an abandoned coffee cup from that morning, and the faint layer of dust that had gathered while I was too busy preparing for today to care about cleaning. My stomach growled, reminding me that I had not eaten anything except a vending machine granola bar and 2 cups of terrible convention center coffee. I opened the freezer, staring blankly for a minute before grabbing the first thing I saw, a frozen burrito. I ripped off the plastic, tossed it on a chipped plate, and shoved it into the microwave, punching in a random set of numbers because it did not matter if it came out half cold. The machine hummed to life, the only sound in the whole place. While the burrito spun slowly on the turntable, I pulled out my phone, part of me still holding onto some foolish shred of hope. Maybe there would be a message. Maybe they would call. Maybe they would send a text saying how proud they were and how sorry they felt for missing it. I unlocked the screen and refreshed the notifications. Nothing. No missed calls. No new texts from mom or dad. Not even a thumbs-up emoji from Brianna. What I did see, though, was a brand new Instagram post. Another photo. This time it was them jet skiing, the whole family smiling wide under the golden Miami sunset. Brianna and Troy riding one jet ski, mom and dad on another, Hannah posing in the background with sunglasses perched on her forehead. The caption read, "Family fun in the sun. Hashtag blessed, hashtag family vibes, hashtag beach day." I stared at it, my finger hovering over the heart icon, not because I intended to like it, but because for a second I could not move at all. It was not even about missing my event anymore. It was the way they were just happy, without even a second thought about where I had been, what I had done, what I might have needed from them today. The microwave beeped shrilly. I yanked open the door, grabbed the plate, and sat down across from the trophy. The burrito oozed half-melted cheese and steam, and I stabbed at it absently with a fork, barely tasting it as I ate. Outside the window, the city buzzed on, oblivious to the kid sitting alone at his kitchen table, a first-place trophy gleaming under the flickering overhead light, and a heart that felt like it weighed more than the heavy glass in front of him. I sat there for a long time after finishing the burrito, staring at the empty plate and the trophy sitting a few inches away, the two of them looking equally out of place on my cluttered table. The buzz of the microwave clock ticking down the minutes was the only sound filling the room. I leaned back in my chair and pulled my phone out again, more out of habit than any real expectation. There was a new message in the family group chat. For a second, my chest tightened, a small, stupid flicker of hope lighting up inside me, even though deep down I already knew better. I opened it. It was a long message, a detailed itinerary for the rest of their vacation. There were excursion times listed, descriptions of dinner reservations at fancy seafood places with names like Coral Bay and Sunset Grill, plans for spa days, and shopping trips. They had included pictures too, snapshots of menus and pools and champagne glasses clinking together in a toast. At the very end of the message, tacked on like an afterthought, were a few short sentences. By the way, don't forget to feed Lucy. Water the succulents every other day. Oh, and the mattress from Amazon should be delivered Thursday. Can you make sure someone is home to accept it? I stared at the words, rereading them until they blurred together. Feed the dog. Water the plants. Wait for the mattress. No mention of the competition. No congratulations. No questions about how it had gone. It was like none of it had ever happened. But they remembered what I could do for them. They remembered the chores, the small favors, the invisible things I was always willing to handle because that was just who I was to them. The one who would take care of everything without needing anything back. I set the phone down on the table next to the trophy, feeling the weight of everything settle on my shoulders. In that moment, something inside me shifted, something quiet and heavy and final. They had forgotten about the biggest moment of my life without blinking, but they trusted me to make sure the dog got fed and the plants did not die and the delivery driver found someone to sign the receipt. I looked at Frankie's travel case still sitting unopened by the door, and for the first time that night, I did not feel angry or sad. I just felt tired. I sat there for a long time, the phone still on the table next to the now cold plate and the shining trophy that nobody cared about but me. The more I stared at it, the heavier everything felt, like a pressure building up inside my chest that I could not ignore anymore. My thumb hovered over Mom's contact for what felt like forever before I finally pressed the call button. It rang 3 times before she picked up, her voice light and breezy, like she was answering from a sun-drenched cabana somewhere. "Hey, honey, everything okay back home?" For a second, I almost hung up. I almost swallowed it all again, the way I always did. But something in me broke loose, something I could not hold back anymore. "I just wanted to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my heart was pounding. "I'm kind of upset, Mom. You all missed the competition today. It was a really big deal for me, and it feels like none of you even cared. There was a pause, a small stretch of silence where I thought maybe, just maybe, she would say something, anything, to make it better. But when she finally spoke, her voice was casual, almost amused. "Oh, Ethan, come on," she said. "You've always been so independent. We thought it wouldn't matter to you." I felt the words hit me like a punch to the gut. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my fingers ached. "It mattered," I said quietly, struggling to keep my voice from shaking. "It mattered a lot." But she just laughed a little, like I was making a big deal out of nothing, and started talking about how beautiful Miami was, and how much Brianna loved the jet skis, and how they were thinking of extending the trip if they could find a good deal on flights. She did not even hear me. She did not want to hear me. To her, to all of them, I had never been the one you showed up for. I was just the one you called when the dog needed feeding, when the plants needed watering, when the packages needed signing. I was the backup plan, the safety net, the convenience, not the priority. I let her words wash over me until they blurred into meaningless noise. I mumbled something about being busy and hung up before she could notice the way my voice cracked at the end. The call ended with the soft click of disconnection, but the real ending had happened long before that. I just had not wanted to see it. Until now. A few days after that awful phone call, I was still stewing in it, going through the motions at work and coming home to sit in silence, the trophy gathering dust on the kitchen table like some strange relic of a life nobody else even knew had changed. I had not heard much from them after that except the usual photo dumps in the family group chat. Pictures of parasailing, poolside cocktails, and fancy dinners with captions like, "Living our best lives." I mostly ignored it all, pretending it did not bother me as much as it actually did. Then one evening, just as I was sitting down to reheat leftovers, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Hannah, my cousin, the one who was always a little too cheerful about everything, as if smiling hard enough could solve any problem. "Hey," her message read. "Mom and Dad are doing a couples massage tomorrow, and Uncle Rob and Aunt Linda are going snorkeling. Can you sleep at the house with Lucy tonight and tomorrow? She gets lonely at night." I stared at the screen, the knot tightening in my chest again, the way it always did lately. After everything, after being forgotten, brushed off, treated like the live-in help, they still expected me to be there, to do what they needed, like nothing had happened. Like I was not sitting in a house full of their empty promises. I typed out a reply without even thinking, my fingers moving faster than my brain. "Do I have to wear a name tag that says pet sitter too?" A minute later, Hannah responded with a laughing emoji and, "LOL, you're so funny." Like I had made some kind of lighthearted joke. Then she added, "But seriously, can you stay with Lucy? She cries when she's alone." I stared at the phone, feeling a hollow kind of anger building up inside me. It was not even real anger, not the sharp, hot kind. It was tired, worn out, heavy. It was the realization that no matter what I did, no matter what I achieved, no matter how much I had needed them to be there for me, to them I would always be just the guy who made sure their dog didn't cry at night. I sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at Hannah's message, the one that treated my life and my time like they were just conveniences to be scheduled around their fun. For a while, I thought about answering, thought about sending something sharp, something cutting enough to maybe make them pause and actually think about what they were doing. But the more I stared at the screen, the less I cared. It felt like trying to shout into a hurricane. They were never going to hear me. So I didn't reply. I set the phone face down on the table and pushed it away like it was something toxic. Then I stood up, grabbed my laptop from the couch, and searched for nearby pet hotels. It did not take long to find one a few neighborhoods over, a clean place with a lot of good reviews about how they treated the animals like family. I called, booked a spot for Lucy for the next several nights, and arranged for a shuttle service to pick her up right from the front door. It cost more than I really wanted to spend, but it was worth every dollar if it meant I could step away without looking back. After I set up everything, I dug through the junk drawer until I found an old sticky notepad, the kind Mom used to scribble grocery lists on when I was a kid. I wrote in big, blocky letters, "If Amazon comes by, tell them I don't live here anymore." I stuck the note right on the front door, pressed it down until the edges curled slightly from the pressure. Then I grabbed my backpack, shoved in a few essentials, and walked out without looking around one last time. No dramatic goodbyes, no second thoughts, no final check to make sure I had not forgotten something. I locked the door behind me and dropped the key through the mail slot, hearing it clatter onto the hardwood floor inside. That was it. I was done being their background character, the silent extra who kept the plants watered, the packages signed for, the dog fed, while they lived out their picture-perfect vacations. I was not an employee. I was not their safety net. I was gone. A few days passed after I walked away from the house and dropped off Lucy at the pet hotel, and in that time, I started to feel a strange sort of peace settle over me. The constant buzzing of guilt, obligation, and resentment that usually sat just under my skin had started to fade, leaving behind a kind of quiet emptiness that, for once, did not feel so bad. I went to work, came home to my own space, and let the silence fill up the places where their noise used to live. One afternoon, while I was sitting on the couch flipping through a half-read book, my phone buzzed again. Out of habit, I picked it up, already knowing what I would see before the screen even lit up. Sure enough, it was a new message from the family group chat, sent by Brianna this time, but clearly on behalf of everyone. The message was a chirpy wall of text, full of exclamation points and sunshine emojis, inviting me to come visit them in Miami. "Come hang out with us," it said. "We miss you. It's so beautiful here, and you should see the sunsets." And then, right at the end, like it was an afterthought, came the real reason they were reaching out. "Oh, and by the way, can you bring Lucy and her food with you when you come? Thanks." I stared at the screen, feeling the heat rise in my face, not out of anger, not even out of sadness anymore, but out of pure disbelief. They were not inviting me because they missed me. They did not want to see me because they suddenly realized they had hurt me. No, what they wanted was someone to transport their dog and her supplies across state lines like a courier, someone to act as a free babysitter while they lounged by the beach sipping cocktails. It was not about me. It had never been about me. I set the phone down carefully on the coffee table, almost laughing at how absurd it all was. To them, I was not Ethan Walker, first-place winner at the National Technical Innovation Competition. I was not the kid who had stayed up for 2 years building a robot and dreaming big enough to make it real. I was just the guy who fed the dog, watered the plants, signed for the packages, and now, apparently, delivered live animals like it was nothing more than a favor squeezed into a vacation plan. There was no anger left to burn, no sadness to pull me under, just a simple, cold clarity that I should have seen a long time ago. I did not reply. I did not even open the group chat again. I stood up, stretched my arms over my head, and walked over to the window, staring out at the city glowing under the late afternoon sun. Somewhere far away, they were laughing and swimming and sending off another meaningless message, assuming I would say yes like I always had. But not this time. Not ever again. The silence did not last long. A day or two after I ignored the ridiculous request to haul Lucy and her food across the country, another string of messages lit up my phone. I did not want to open them, but I did anyway, more out of a grim sense of duty than curiosity. The first one was from Brianna. It was long and emotional, full of phrases like, "I don't even recognize you anymore, and you've changed so much." She said I was making drama over nothing, and that everyone else just wants to move forward and have a good time. Reading it, it felt less like an actual attempt to understand and more like a guilt trip carefully wrapped up in hurt feelings. She accused me of turning my back on the family, of being cold, of acting like I was better than everyone else just because I had some competition or whatever. I barely had time to process her message when another one came through, this time from Dad. His was much shorter, but it hit harder in its own way. "You are selfish," he wrote. "Family should always forgive each other, no matter what. You're throwing everything away over your pride." I sat there for a long time, the phone heavy in my hand, feeling the weight of their words pressing down on me. But instead of folding under it like I used to, I felt something different rising up in me, something steadier. They were not mad because I had changed. They were mad because I had stopped making it easy for them, because I had stopped playing my part as the one who did all the work quietly, without asking for anything back, because I had finally said no. It hit me then, harder than anything else had over these last few weeks. Their love, if you could even call it that, was not unconditional. It was convenience. It was there when I was useful. It was there when I filled the empty spaces in their lives without needing much in return. It was never about me being happy or seen or supported. It was about me staying small enough, quiet enough, available enough. I had not changed. I had just learned to set boundaries. And now that I had, they did not know what to do with me. I locked my phone and set it face down on the table, feeling strangely calm. The messages kept coming, little buzzes lighting up the screen over and over again, but I did not pick it up again. For the first time in a long time, I chose myself. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through my blinds and the familiar buzzing of my phone still lighting up with unread messages I had no intention of answering. I sat up, stretched, and looked around at my apartment, the little life I had carved out for myself piece by piece. It was quiet. It was simple. And for the first time in what felt like forever, it was mine. On a whim, I grabbed my laptop and started browsing hotels. Not in Miami. Not anywhere near them. Just here, my city, my home. I found a penthouse suite downtown, tucked high above the noise and rush, with floor-to-ceiling windows that promised a view of the skyline. Underfloor heating, a deep soaking tub, and a king-size bed I could stretch out in without hearing anyone else's demands. Without hesitating, I booked it for 3 days. When I checked in later that afternoon, the woman at the front desk smiled at me like she actually meant it, and the second I stepped into the room, I felt a weight fall off my shoulders. The view was even better than the pictures. Endless glass towers glittered in the afternoon sun. The city spread out like a living map beneath me. I kicked off my shoes, flopped down onto the bed, and let out a long breath I hadn't even realized I had been holding. The next morning, I ordered room service, a huge stack of pancakes with butter melting down the sides, strawberries, syrup, a pot of strong coffee, and when it arrived, I set it up by the window. I went back to my bag and pulled out the trophy, the one that had sat ignored and gathering dust on my kitchen table. I wiped it off carefully and placed it next to my breakfast. I snapped a photo of the scene, the pancakes steaming in the sunlight, the trophy glinting proudly, my hand lifting a coffee cup in a quiet toast to myself. I posted it with a caption that said everything I had been feeling, but in fewer words than I ever could have explained to them. Celebrating on my own. And I'm proud of it. No explanations. No apologies. Sitting there with the whole city stretched out before me, I realized I had finally let go of the idea that love had to be earned by making yourself small and useful. I realized that freedom, real freedom, meant being able to say no without guilt, to choose your own happiness without waiting for someone else's permission. It was better to be alone and free than to be surrounded by people who only saw you when they needed something. Better to stand alone than to live as someone's backup plan. Thanks for reading my story, Reddit. I'm curious. Have you ever had a moment when you realized setting boundaries wasn't selfish but necessary? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your thoughts.